Because the classics essay is a challenge and it is the first formal essay that you will be writing, I wanted to take a minute just for this essay only and grade an essay, and I want you to go through that with me so you can see the process of grading a classics essay. Quickly, let's look over those requirements. There's a step-by-step tutorial, so I'm just going to breeze through this, but you can see that we require 2 articles written about this classic. Again, remember that you need to have actually read the classic. I'll be able to tell instantly. Now, you're going to pick one of these possibilities, and again, there's already tutorials on this, but this is important as we grade this particular essay coming up. You wanted to find 2 articles, not Cliff's Notes or Spark Notes, but 2 legitimate articles from which you will quote to create your 3 paragraphs. As a quick note, the essay calls for between 300 and 500 words. Some students think, I'm going to write 1,000,000 words, and that's going to be awesome. No, if we write more than that, then we're going to have 3 paragraphs that are way too long, and that is not required for this particular essay. We want 3 beautifully written paragraphs, choosing one of these items. Let's take a look at an essay that was written and let's grade it together. The first thing we see is that there's only 1 word count. And remember, if we watched the the tutorial on word count, we know that we needed to have a revisions total as well as a grand total for the word count. Notice that the image is a good image, but it's not centered. Let's read the opening sentence of the introduction together. First, the writer starts with the title. We know from prerequisite skills that we never start a sentence with a title. But the title is in italics, which is good. Let's look at the problems in that first sentence, which would have been corrected by reading the sentence out loud. Let's do that. The Iliad is an ancient Greek epic novel that was written approximately in 750 BC by Homer, who is a legendary writer and the author of 2 epic Greek poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey. You can hear when I read it that that's a long run-on sentence. This is a misuse of the semicolon. The Iliad and the Odyssey are not in italics. And we've got a lot of extra words that we don't need to have. Let's clean this up and look at what a corrected opening sentence would be. First, you can see that I fixed the word count. Yes, the word count of the essay is 447, but the revisions equaled 900 words, and that made the grand total word count 1347. You can see where I added spaces, the title, and then the image is all centered. Let's see how I fixed this opening sentence. Written by Homer, comma, the Iliad is an ancient Greek epic 750 BC novel. Period. End of the sentence. We don't need to write a long run-on sentence. That's it. That's the whole sentence. Homer, we don't need a comma there, was a legendary writer and the author of 2 Greek epic poems. Since we have a list that follows, we want a colon. Remember, the colon stands like 2 little soldiers, meaning that a list is going to follow. That's what a colon is. The Iliad and the Odyssey, all nicely italicized. End of sentence. That's it. All right, let's go back to the submission. This is clearly a very bright student. We can tell that. The problem is the student didn't edit the essay by reading it out loud. Let's read this sentence together. This is the second sentence in the step-by-step process. I'm interested in this particular topic because I have always admired ancient Greek stories about their gods and brave heroes, and the Iliad itself is one of the greatest novels of Greeks. Okay, you can hear it when I read it, can't you? Clearly a bright student, but did not edit this. Let's look at the edited version. Let's look at the corrected one, which this bright student would have created had they read the content out loud. I am interested in this particular topic because I have always admired ancient Greek stories about gods and brave heroes, and the Iliad is one of the classic Greek novels. You see how much better that sounds? Not all those jumbled words. And remember that since the gods and goddesses are not capitalized. Let's go back to the submission. I would say this topic relates to my life because I grew up watching and admiring movies like the Odyssey, Troy, and many other movies based on Greek mythology and their novels. Therefore, the topic is very familiar to me. Okay, this is something I want you to learn from. There is not a therefore required in this particular sentence. There's not a logical argument here. The student is saying why they relate to the topic. There's no therefore required. So we have some problems with the way to punctuate a title. These are film titles. They do not need quotes. They need to be in italics. Let's look at the fix. This story relates to my life because I grew up watching and admiring movies like the Odyssey, Troy, and many other, we have movies, so let's fix that. And many other films based on Greek mythology and novels. That's a nice sentence, isn't it? Makes perfect sense. We don't have a therefore. We simply have somebody explaining how they relate to the particular topic that they've chosen. All right, let's go. As you can see, we didn't need all these extra words, I would say, and repeating movies. We wanted to tighten that up and make it clear. The classic novel is about the great Trojan War between Trojans and Greeks, which lasted almost 10 years. The thematic structure of the Iliad is based on the battles during the Trojan War and all the important occasions that are happening during that. You can see that this is the problem. You got a couple of good sentences here. Really good sentences here. Okay, first, I'm going to go ahead and take the classic novel because we've mentioned it several times in the paragraph. All right. That's a good sentence. Next, we have to just go off in all these extra words that are happening during that. What happened is the student is writing the essay and writing along and following the directions beautifully and get jumbled up in the end and then just ends the sentence. So there's not editing there. Let's look at the fix. The classic novel is the story of the great Trojan War between Trojans and Greeks, which lasted almost 10 years. The thematic structure of the Iliad is based on the battles during the Trojan War and all the other important occasions that were in the past tense, happening during that conflict. So this is where the student went wrong. Instead of just ending it with that, we need to add that what. Okay, let's go back to paragraph 2 is writing about the theme of the classic novel that was selected. Let's see how the submission handles paragraph 2. Okay, the paragraph should start by mentioning the theme. This sentence mentions the plot. The novel of the Iliad of Homer is the story about glorifying the war, which was caused by such a beautiful aspect like love. According to an article about the theme of the novel from the website sparknotes.com, not from a legitimate article source, but from SparkNotes, Homer never implies that the fight constitutes a waste of time or human life. Rather, he portrays each side as having a justifiable reason to fight and depicts warfare as a respectable and even glorious manner of settling a dispute. Okay, After this, there needed to be a sentence that explains what this means. It's never enough to just simply add a quote into the paper and hope for the best. The reader needs to see the quote and say, okay, well, what does that mean? Yes, you tell the reader what that means. Let's read the rest of this and then we'll look at the fix. With this novel, okay, we don't know which novel. I went ahead and I okayed it back up here where we put this classic novel, but again, every sentence needs to be able to stand alone and make perfect sense. If we took this out of context, we wouldn't have one idea what they were talking about. With this novel, Homer tried to show all the glory and the beauty of the war. The importance of the war is mainly described with the fact that the gods and goddesses also took sides and participated in the war. The men showed their worth in front of the gods by fighting bravely and dying with honor. The gods in the meantime picked their favorites and enjoyed all the glory of the war. Okay, we have the war way too many times. You can see that, right? When you hear it, you can see that this smart student is just repeating the same thing over and over again. Okay, with this novel is not correct, is it? And an author doesn't try to show anything. This is a classic novel. He showed it. He didn't try to do anything. And then this adding all these extra words, the fact that we don't need that. It's completely unnecessary. And again, gods and goddesses are not capitalized. And then we have just that now we take off in this run-on sentence. Also, took sides and participated in the war. So we have a long jumbled up sentence there. Then the men showed their worth in front of the gods by fighting bravely and dying with honor. That's a good sentence. This is a good sentence. And it's over. That's the end of the sentence. But instead, we have a comma and we move right on into a run-on sentence. Let's see the fix. First, the student talks about writes about the theme of the Iliad, but uses spark notes. So first, in order to fix it, we need to go back over here and look for a vetted website, not Cliff's Notes or Spark Notes. We need to find a legitimate page, not Schmoop. But this looks good. Study Academy, Academy Lessons. I'm going to look through here and I'll find one. This was not easy because there are so many notes pages that are not necessarily vetted resources. But here is a paper that was submitted to MIT. And something with an edu is generally something from an educational source and therefore vetted. So let's look at this PDF and see what I can find that I can use instead of a quote from SparkNotes. Okay, I found this one sentence that I can use because I think that the theme of the Iliad is honor among thieves. It's all about romance and men owning women and blah, blah, lots of love, and I'm using air quotes around that, but the Greek idea of love, which was possession of women, so that's kind of fun. But I'm going to use this one quote, and this comes from a vetted source, which I would then copy the URL, go to EasyBib, and cite this instead of SparkNotes or Cliff's Notes. So I'm going to use this sentence in the fix, and the essay is written by Cheryl Texan. Here is the fix for that paragraph, number 2. Notice that we have a quote from an article, and we have a quote from the actual novel itself. The novel The Iliad is a story about glorification of war caused by a beautiful and tragic love. In my opinion, the theme of the novel is honor among thieves. According to it, now I need to prove that, because again, I don't know anything, so I have to prove that. According to an article about the theme of the Iliad, the idea of family honor adds a new level of intricacy in maintaining a balance between individual and community honor. Texan. That's the author of that article that we found. Within the novel, surrounded by concepts of honor, Homer shows all the victory and the pain of war. I don't think we need a thee there. and pain of war. The importance of love-driven war is depicted in gods and goddesses who took sides and participated in the war. The men showed their worth in front of the gods by fighting bravely and dying with honor. Gods, in the meantime, chose their favorites and enjoyed the fruits of war. For example, so I have two statements, and then I have a proof. You see what I mean by proof? I made two statements, and now you got to hear the reader saying, says who? Well, says this quote from the novel. Homer refers to a god preference as glorious Hector, who was ever the bravest fighter of the Trojans, and there is where it is located. And of course, that's the end of the sentence. Honor, in the end, was earned in love and community. Okay, so I made my point. Now we have the final paragraph, and let's look at the submission. This is what the student wrote. One of the most important motifs of the story is the armors of the warriors. In fact, Homer often portrays a hero's armor as having an aura of its own separate from its wearer. In one of the epic's more tender scenes, Hector removes his helmet to, well, we don't know what. In the novel, author often shows that the armor of the warrior is not just an item of clothing to protect his body, but also it is a form of representation. Again, this it, all overusing words. It means nothing. That is a word that means absolutely nothing. If you take this sentence out of context, it doesn't mean anything. It what holds a deeper meaning, which is shown in one of the scenes where Patroclus dies while wearing Achilles' armor, and after he is being defeated, the armor goes one way and the body on another. The story leaves unforgettable impressions. I enjoyed reading this literature piece, and I am grateful that I could learn more details about the story. Okay, so first of all, armor is a symbol. It's not a motif. So back on the requirements page, we would have chosen symbol, not motif. We also have another quote from SparkNotes instead of a legitimate resource. So I'm not going to go through this, but you realize from the last paragraph that I would go and find an actual resource that describes the use of armor as a symbol in the Iliad. Let's look at the fix. Okay, here is the fix for this, and I'm going to just show you where I would add content. One of the most important symbols of the story is the armor of the warriors. In fact, Homer often portrays a hero's armor as having an aura of its own separate from its wearer. And that's from an article, not from SparkNotes, but from an article. In my opinion, the representation of armor relates to honor. In the novel, Homer often shows that the armor of the warrior is not just an item of clothing to protect his body, but also a form of representation. Armor holds a deeper meaning, as shown in the scene where Patroclus dies while wearing Achilles' armor. There, I will include the quote from the text, just exactly as we did in the second paragraph. We had a quote from the article, and we had a quote from the text. How will we get a quote from the text? We would have read it. After he is defeated, the armor goes one way and the body another. As the soul leaves the body, so the armor leaves the fallen warrior. The story leaves okay, we got leaves and leaves. Let me fix that. These are the two concluding sentences. The story impresses upon me unforgettable impressions. I enjoyed reading this literature piece, and I am grateful that I could learn more details about the story. All right? So that's the completed fixed essay. Now, down here, you can see, let's go to the original. The student did not complete the steps in EasyBib. That's why we have hyperlinks instead of a works cited page. And remember that in EasyBib, the student would need to have selected all of the items and then clicked Export Print as a Word Doc. And that would have removed these hyperlinks and made a complete citation page. And for my corrected essay, I'm going to, instead of these SparkNotes things, I'm going to add the quotes from the 2 articles that were required in the assignment. So there we have it, and that is the only example in the course that I will show you of a graded essay. I include that because I think it's important for the first essay as a building block for you to see exactly how an essay is evaluated and how the rubric is calculated. So moving forward, enjoy writing this essay, and remember, editing is key. You've already proved that you are brilliant. Now, the next thing to prove is that you are a great editor of your own work. That concludes this tutorial.